I think I'm live. I think it's working. Can you guys hear me? Am I live? Yay. Cool. Yeah, it was just spinning round saying connecting for about 5 minutes. Hello, everyone. Thank you. Good to see you all, or see your chat coming up. Lily sent a Christmas tree. That's nice. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hi, Mike. All good. Okay. Before I start today's Waffle, and particularly the Taiji, 𝐒𝐴𝐻, 𝐿, particularly the Taiji history of the Deng family, and a little bit about the difference between the so-called traditional and modern Taiji. So that's what I'd like to talk a little about today. A tad blurry and stuttery. Not sure, Lucas. Not sure. Yeah, good. All right. This week's blog post, which you can read on the Rising Crane website, is what we're going to talk about today. But as usual, if you have any questions or anything you want me to specifically address, type them in the comments and I will read them and then I'll endeavor to answer. So we have the Deng family Taiji here. What I've tried to do, put together myself, because I've tried to pull a few different things in. And it's the first time I've kind of written it out in this way. And it was quite interesting for me to see how the different lineages and generations connect horizontally. Usually they're just done vertically. And I wanted to see, hi Empal, who had taught who and who had influenced who. And so actually for my own exercise, it was worth doing because it's a little clearer when it's done this way. And it explains the relationship between, here you have Chen style, traditional Yang family, modern Yang style, and then other styles like Wu and Sun style on this side. So talk a little bit about it. Oh, and then of course at the bottom is this all goes down to my Sifu's father, then my Sifu. And then my Sifu's pulled in his Minloi Jum from the 𝐿𝐻𝐿 and 𝐿𝐻𝐿, which I already did a blog post about that. So if you really want the whole picture, you need to read the 3 parts. Gosh, I used to be a coach, now I'm writing. Okay, here we talk. The Yang style of Taiji was introduced to the Deng family by my Sifu's father, Deng 𝐿𝐻𝐿. And I'll talk a little bit about the history of Taiji, the styles, forms, practiced today. We'll start with, as we did with the Shaolin myth, and then the 𝐿𝐻𝐿 Tibetan white crane myth. Now I'll talk a little bit about the Taiji myth. So here we're talking about stuff which is passed down in kind of oral history. There's no records of this, and different lineages have different stories. One of the stories is Zhan Sanfeng, who was the founder of Taiji. Sanfeng means 3 peaks, so in the mountains with 3 peaks. He was born in 1247, studied Shaolin Kung Fu as a young man. Shaolin would have been very much established by then because that started in the year 500, so that's the earliest recorded. So when he was 67 years old, he met a Taoist sage and learned internal alchemy. In other words, he did the practice for immortality. He did not reach a deep level. He traveled to the Wudang Mountains for solitary practice. So he spent 9 years in the mountains by himself. I'm jealous. That's what I want to do, spend 9 years in the mountains by myself. And attain the Tao, the way. Okay, he reached the higher level in the solitary practice, and then he got it. Enlightenment. They call it enlightenment in Buddhism, and then they call it immortality in Taoism. The story was he lived to be over 200 years. So this is a myth. Take it with a pinch of salt. And he created Taiji after witnessing a battle between a snake and a magpie. So interesting, right? 𝐿𝐻𝐿 was a snake and an ape. An ape and a crane. And this is between a snake and a magpie. But you see, I suspect these are the same stories because we always have the concept of hard and soft defeating hard, and that's the lesson, that's the story. So the principle of soft defeats hard, and then after he'd understood intuitively, so he may have literally saw a snake fighting a magpie. He may have meditated. Remember, he had a good background in Shaolin Kung Fu, so he already knew how the techniques went, but he had an insight because of his practice about in the using the internal force and relaxation and so on. Hey, Sean, good to see you. And so therefore it enabled him to get the concept of Taiji. When he got that, he came down from the mountain, as is the normal. When a person achieves that, they go back to society to help other people. They could just stay and kind of bliss out, but they want to be of use to society, so they go back and travel around and do good deeds and do a bit of a Jack Reacher or a 𝐒𝐻𝐿 or however it works. So yeah, I mean, according to the stories, he did that for a couple of 100 years, and was, you know, he could fight tigers with his bare hands. The left and right striking tiger form in the Taiji was like him fighting barehanded, fighting a tiger and all this. So larger than life character. Okay, now we talk about the recorded history. So out of the myth, this is more kind of proven stuff. Chen village. So the Taiji, as we know it, comes from the Yang family, and the Yang family got it from the Chen village. This is a little contentious, but it seems to me that the Chen didn't originally call it Taiji. They didn't use the name Taiji. They just called it Changchuan, or long fist boxing. Okay, and in those days, that was the kind of northern Shaolin generic practice. And although they may have taken it further, they may have introduced a lot of principles, and they had a reputation for being very, very good, but I don't think they called it Taiji. I don't think anyone used that name. I think the Yang family kind of coined it and then popularized it. So it's a little bit like happens today, where you have a marketing thing where someone has an idea and a name and it takes off, like Nike or something, like a brand, and then other people go, oh, I wish we'd have thought that. So then the Chen came back later and said, we're the original Taiji. So yes, they were the style that it came from, but they weren't the first to use that name. That came quite later. So as far as I can tell, I mean, there's no recorded proof of this. So this was, when was this? It was practiced in the Chen family for hundreds of years. This records that the first generation was Chen Wanting, who was born in the late 16th century. So it went down, successor, 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 always taught within people with that surname, because that's how it works in China. The Chen village, everyone in that village has the surname. 6 generations down, Chen Changxing, 1771 to 1853. I think by that time the sets had been codified into what we would now recognize as the Chen style Taiji. By that 6th generation, it was recognizable, the form and the shape was recognizable, and it was him that taught Yang Luchan, right? So just reading from my blog post here. So Yang Luchan was an interesting character. You know, he'd heard of he also was Shaolin. So most martial artists in those days would have started with Shaolin. So what does that mean? I mean, it's interesting for what does that mean for us? It seems to imply that a lot of these great Taiji masters didn't start by doing soft forms. They started by doing hard physical practice, built these up, had lots of fighting experience, and then they refined the skill using Taiji. The question is, can you just learn soft, slow Taiji and then become a great fighter? And there doesn't seem to be any evidence that that's the case or that that's true. The original Taiji would have been much more physical and dynamic and so on. So you have hi Joan, welcome. You have a transition. So you've already learned the physical stuff. Your body's strong. You're training with the Shaolin weaponry, and so you're flexible and strong and everything else. Now you're refining, so it's a higher level. Of course, people will practice Taiji now mainly for health, not for fighting. So it doesn't matter if you haven't got that background, but you need to understand that it's very difficult to only practice. You can't refine what you haven't got, basically. So that's important to understand that. Hi, Mohammed, welcome. So we talk about Yang Luchan. So what did I say? He began in Shaolin. Heard about Chen village because it was obviously had a great reputation. They were very, very good. He wanted to study there. He traveled all the way there, but he was turned away because he wasn't called Chen. He wasn't one of the family, and Chinese very traditional. It's a family style. You can't learn. So he started working nearby, and there's some stories that he used to watch them practice every day over the wall and try to learn as much as he could that way and practice the sets until one of the Chen people saw him practicing and went, okay, you're obviously very serious. You're dedicated. He was there for years before they actually let him in. Come on in, come and learn. And of course, he ended up being a very good student, studied the whole system, and then he went back home. Went back home, taught his family and his neighbors. Then he went to Beijing because he was famous by that point. They called him Yang the Invincible, or Yang of no rival, depending on how you translated it. So the idea was he was unbeatable. So very, very high level of martial art. So when he went to Beijing with this reputation, he ended up being the coach to the royal family. So now we have to be a little bit, you have to understand a little bit, like this is where I'm a little bit skeptical of certain things. So he taught the royal family, which means obviously two things. One, he was famous and he could command a good fee. But secondly, he needed to teach in such a way that the people of that time, the Manchurians, were very, the high class. They had the long nails. They're very made up beautifully, silks. They weren't going to be wanting to sweat and massively and train super hard. So he had to really kind of, should we say, low impact version. So then we started getting the idea of, instead of being like really hard, powerful martial art, it was smooth, it was soft, it was more graceful. He took out some of the jumps and so on. So that was a kind of popularity of it. So in the same way, if you go to a boxercise class, for example, I'm giving the modern, our equivalent in our culture now. You have a boxercise class. If you go to the boxercise class, you are learning the same punches that Mike Tyson does. You're learning jab, cross, hook, uppercut, same footwork, and so on. And so it's the same, right? But if you were to prepare for a professional boxing match by going to a boxercise class, you wouldn't get it. You wouldn't get the skill. Why? Not because it's different technique, but because the training is much less intense, and because you're not sparring and crucially, you're not getting punched in the face. That's being frank about it. Who wants to be punched in the face? So if he taught that way to the Manchurians, he wouldn't have lasted very long. But by emphasizing beautiful, soft, relaxed, got very popular, began to spread, his fame spread. So you need to understand a little bit about how it works. And as I say, boxercise is conceptually the same thing, right? Everyone wants to do MMA training. Nobody wants to tap out. Nobody wants to get choked unconscious, have some big sweaty guy on top punching them. Nobody wants that, but everyone wants to be an MMA fighter. So, you can package it in such a way. You can teach genuine techniques. You can get people genuinely fit, but they're not going to be called like Yang the Invincible. They're not going to get that, right? That's harsh training. Yang's son, okay, Yang Jianhao. This is Yang Jianhao. The training was so brutal, he wanted to run away. He apparently tried to commit suicide a couple of times. It was just awful. He was like, his father would whip him and train him for when he was tiny, and it was awful. That's what they did to reach that level. So, but he became a very great master, and he softened it even more. So his father softened it when he taught the Manchurians. Yang Jianhao softened it even more. His own son, though, didn't train in his youth. His eldest son didn't train in his youth. That was Yang Chengfu. Yang Chengfu is probably the most famous. He didn't start training till he was already adult. He was about 20, because he couldn't see the point. Like, what do I have to learn martial arts for? I want to learn like something useful, and so all this ruffians and fighting. But his dad persuaded him, do it as health, do it for practice, strengthen the mind, strengthen the body, strengthen the nation, make the population healthy. And he was won over. So he started training. He trained with his father for about 15 years. His father passed away, and he carried on but he took it much more seriously after, apparently. He was like morning, noon, night, wanted to get it. And he ended up actually getting the highest level, even though he didn't start to lose later. So he ended up the most, we would say now that by that generation, the form had become the standard Yang form. So when you see like Yang family Taiji, it's his form that they do now. That would have been 1936. He passed away, so not that long ago, really. People think some of these sets are, thousands of years old, but it's not that long ago. So that was Yang Chengfu, and his son, Yang Xiaotong. He had 4 sons actually. But this is the oldest, and allegedly the best kung fu. And he went to South China, Guangzhou. He actually worked in a bank and met my Sifu's father at that time, and they ended up training together. And they exchanged techniques, and that was how the Yang family form came into the Deng family. So that was that's the first part. Right, break, because I'm let that sink in. And then any questions on that or anything else? Because then I'm going to talk about the modern Taiji after that. It's like a history lesson. Ironically, I was never interested in history at school. It just wasn't my subject. Now I'm interested in it. Anyone have any questions? Hopefully you can still hear me and we're still good. Nothing's coming through. Fascinating. Thank you. So we are coming through. All right, I'll press on. The modern, so-called modern. Oh, do you think Taiji was really linked to Taoism? Not in the way it's claimed. Not in the way it's claimed. Shaolin Kung Fu is Buddhist. It's Zen, what they call Chan. Chan is the Chinese pronunciation of Zen. So the movements would have come from Shaolin, but the indigenous Chinese religion of Taoism would have shaped the Buddhist practice, and Taoist priests and Buddhist monks would have swapped and exchanged techniques. So, you know, some of the names of the movements in the Chen style are clearly Buddhist, not Taoist. So I'm suspicious. All this stuff about the Wudang Mountains and all the schools that have popped up, all of them have popped up since the movie Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. All of the Westerners going there up to the Wudang Mountains to learn Taiji. None of that existed before that movie. Yeah, just to put it into context, there's a massive business thing going on here as well. I love Chinese martial art history. So do I. I love the myths as well as the real history. Just got to know which are myths. You just got to know that they're myths, and it's fine. It's all good. Thank you. Really interesting. 𝐒𝐚𝐽𝐽. Is that 𝐒𝐚𝐽𝐽? Thank you very much. Hi, Christine. All good. Still hear you. Lila. Life being so brief with its own battles, how can one go about seeking a balance between enlightenment, immortality, and leading a normal, useful life? I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer that yet, Lily. I'm gonna answer that when I come back down from the mountain. I think traditionally, there's stages you have to go through, right? So young guys, fights, you know, making their mark in the world. Ladies have a different path. It's a different world now. Some of the stuff doesn't fit anymore, but the old idea was the family unit. Kids grow up. That was the point when people then maybe go into more spiritual practice. But it's so different now, and it's like to some degree, technology has freed us from the shackle of some of this stuff. So I don't know. It's something I'm always contemplating in my own way, but I can't speak for anyone else. That's all I can say. Sue from Wotton. Okay, that's easier to pronounce. Thank you. Have you applied Petersonian Chinese martial arts myths? Have I? Petersonian thought. I would say it's Jungian. Read Jung. There's a few particular ones. I'll send you some book lists. So where would people go to the source? Inside. I'm not going me. I'm going inside. Inside. It's all in there. But we have a lot of. Are the archetypes notably different in your opinion? I'll do a waffle specifically on that, Lucas. Again, because for me, it's something I'm studying, not something I feel like I really have got to the bottom of. So but yeah, I think they're at the bottom. They're the same. I mean, like, you know, a snake and a magpie and an ape and a crane. I mean, they're the same archetypes, right? It's the same story. It's the same myth. Yes. So going back to Esther's question, the source is your Taiji or your Kung Fu has to come out from inside you. A lot of these movements, which are the masters would like go into great introspection and, you know, have these visions of these animals and so on. What they're communicating with, in my way of thinking, own innate body wisdom that has been shaped by evolution for millions of years. So we have a lot of this stuff in us. We've got to bring it out. So some interesting stuff in modern science about epigenetics and the idea that certain genetic switches can be switched on and off by training, right? So how I see it, right? I'm going to go back to this in a minute, but I'm veering off. How I see it, you know, you're having some traditions the idea that we're all internally, no return to Wudang Mountain. I don't know. Who knows? This is how I'm currently thinking about it. So we have buffering, pity. We have, okay, what was I saying? We have this potential, okay, potential for, Taoists would say for immortality, Buddhists would say for enlightenment, Christians would say made in the image of God, or however you want to see it, that there's a potential, there's a potential there, but it needs to be switched on, it needs to be trained. So on one hand, you've got this kind of idea that the individual isn't important, right? Like communism, everything's for the good of the country, the individual doesn't mean anything. On the other hand, you've got the idea that the individual is potentially perfect, is some kind of sovereign, right? Is really, really important. So sorry, it's buffering. I'll do my best. Okay. But so the truth is, so this is why I don't like some of the modern stories. The old myths are brilliant, but the modern stories like Kung Fu Panda and stuff, I have problems with those because the message is, oh, sorry guys. See if I can fix it a little bit. It's buffering. Yeah, I object to the message that you're perfect as you are. You just, like Kung Fu Panda, eat the cookies, don't need to train, your Kung Fu's perfect, it will come out. No, categorically, absolutely not true, wrong, no. Okay, you have a lot of work to do for it to come out. You have to train for years, right? This is why you have to practice for a long time with a good teacher, and you have to go through the path, okay? Then you can bring it out. So it may have been there all along, but you can't reach it. So you can say everyone is enlightened. Okay, what does that mean? Because you're still suffering, right? So it's really important that through the practice, it's inside you, but it has to come out. So that's the source. And then when it comes out, you have to then return back to the culture and feed the new information back into the collective, which is the, like the story of the Matrix, Neo returning, the one returning to the machine city. And that's the myth, individual, develop, come back, bring the knowledge, update the system, update the software, and that's culture. That's how the proper relationship between the individual and the culture, and then that's what I think it's talking about. Okay, no buffering in Sandy. I've given up the cookies. Oh, I'm getting messages that the waffle's stuck for some of you guys. So if you reload, it works again. Reload, it works again. I nearly said Matrix in reply to what is the source. It's the same story. It's the cool thing, man. Every generation retells the same stories in whatever's the updated form, right? And it's the same story. Right. I reloaded, now working. Excellent. So you missed me giving the whole secrets. Now you missed it. Next bit. Now we talk about the modern Taiji, right? This was Jin Ling. Now he was an interesting character. He was I don't know if he's a commander or general in the army. Was an army guy. Left the army, wanted to start his own school. 1885 to 1931. He wanted to build an academy, big martial arts school. He was called the Sword God, very famous Taiji Wudang sword, right? So he wanted to teach Taiji in his academy, and that time Yang Chengfu, third generation Yang family, was the most famous Taiji teacher. So he said, right, could you standardize a form for our school? So it was actually Yang Chengfu that standardized what is now called the 88 form. Now, Yang family people maybe wouldn't like that, but that's a fact. It was at that time not so standardized. So he was the technical advisor. The pictures was Liu Lin. Liu Lin was a student of Sun Lutang. If you know anything about Chinese martial art fighting history, you'll know Sun Lutang, because in the north he was like very, very famous fighter. He was supposed to be the highest level martial artist. Xingyi Bagua. Then he learned Taiji, integrated it, and formed what is now called the Sun style Taiji. So you have 4 main schools of Taiji, which is the Chen we spoke about, the Yang, okay? From the Yang came the Wu style. Then there was another style which was called Hao or Wu, different Wu, and from that came the Sun style. But that also goes back to the Yang Liu-Chan was Yang Liu-Chan's student. So Chen as being the oldest, then the Yang, then the Wu Hao, and then the third generation Yang, and so on. So you can see it was all happened over a period of about 100 years within a very small geographical area. Just like I was talking about Canton and the 10 tigers and how all these people would cross-train, the same thing happened in Beijing. People don't like to admit it. And I have another theory about the so-called internal styles. These are all buddies. So that was like, our styles are internal, everyone else is external. We'll be Taoist because it's internal to China. You'll be Buddhist because that's external. That comes from the West, from India, so external to China. So our forms are like higher level. We're internal, they're external. Yeah, it's the same kind of what do you call it? Tribal thinking, right? Tribal thinking. See, I'm saying like sacrilege. Sacrilege. Shouldn't say this stuff. I'll be struck off. Okay, so Liu Lin's pictures were the standard, right? Then what happened? Along comes communism. Along comes communism. The People's Republic of China, established 1949. Communists didn't like traditional stuff. They wanted to sweep away everything that was old, everything which was superstitious, which was old-fashioned, get rid of it. But they were persuaded that, look, you want the workers fit and healthy and to do work for the people. They can't do that if they're sick. Taiji is really good for your health. You should promote Taiji. So they're like, okay, the long form is 20 minutes. We need something short. We need something 5 minutes. So they put it to a committee. Right, guess who was the head man? Was this guy, Li Tianjie. This man was the son of Liu Lin. So he said, I'm going to base it on my dad's form, but I'm going to take out all the repetitions and some of the more difficult movements. So those of you who are learning in my academy, you learned, first of all, you learned this form, which is the 24. Then you learn the 88. So you've gone from the Li Tianjie form to the Liu Lin form. Okay? That's what happened. Li Tianjie at that time, so this is where it all comes back down to me. This is where I learned it from, because he had, well, first of all, my Sifu's father, because China was trying to promote Tai Chi at that time, so they were closing down private martial arts schools, but and then opening up government ones that taught the kind of official stuff, right? Where the emphasis was health rather than fighting, for political reasons. Okay, so you had to teach the 24. They called it the Beijing 24, and so they selected masters from each area of China, sent them to Beijing to study with Li Tianjie. And from the Guangdong province, which is big, Guangzhou, which is the capital, that's like the capital city of the province. Like I'm at the moment in Bedford, but that's in Bedfordshire. So you've got Guangzhou in Guangdong, right? So there were, in all of Guangdong, which was huge, there was only 2 teachers. One of them was my Sifu's father that went to Beijing to learn. So he learned the standardized routines, the 24 first, then was 32 sword, 88, 48, which is now 42 because they changed it a little bit. But those were the so-called modern routines. So my Sifu had already learned the Yang style from Yang Xiaocheng, but then he learned the modern kind of versions, the standardized versions from Li Tianjie, right? Some of you guys have met Master Wang, who was one of my teachers, and he was a disciple of Li Tianjie. So I've kind of studied with the direct, if you like, from those people. So right, so this is my daddy, Dang Gam To, right? So he learned these routines, and then he taught in Guangzhou. He was the first one to teach the 24 forms, and because he was well loved, the government kind of left him alone. You teach your Taiji, you teach your 24. After that, it's your business, which meant he could carry on teaching his 𝐻𝐸 and Taiji and 𝐻𝐸. At that time, 𝐻𝐸 and 𝐻𝐸 at that time were lots of schools were closed down, so there wasn't many people teaching it because it was like banned. But he taught 24 Taiji, and then after closed the door and teaches traditional, and he was left to get on with it. Okay, train, period. Darn right. The potential is what is perfect. The individual needs progress. Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. The potential is what is perfect. It's potentially perfect. There's something perfect now, but it's manifesting in this world, and it needs work and it needs progress to manifest its potential. Yes, even though in some sense it's always in the present moment. This is the kind of the Zen idea as well. Yes, but you're right. Nearly said Matrix. Yeah. 𝐿𝐻𝐸𝐽, yeah, 𝐿𝐻𝐸𝐽, right. 𝐿𝐻𝐸𝐽 in Cantonese we call 𝐒𝐞𝐥. Right. So what, just to finish off tonight, because it's 5 past, explain a little bit, and then I'll talk a little bit about 𝐵𝐼𝐽. What's 𝐵𝐼𝐽? So my Sifu's dad used to do this, right? So obviously the young kids, he would teach the modern routines, and for the people who wanted to learn the fighting, he would teach 𝐿𝐻𝐸𝐽, 𝐿𝐻𝐸𝐽. Okay, cool. His family style. Taiji people would come. They may be older people, maybe sick, wanted to do some health practice. He would teach them the 24. Then the long form. The advanced ones would get the 48. Sword, push hands. Okay, cool. The ones that have been with him for years, hey, we want to learn some new stuff. What else is there? So he would take a lot of the sets from his family system, but he would teach it in a style which we call 𝐵𝐼𝐽, which is needling cotton, which is basically what Yang Lu Chan did with the Chen style when he taught the Manchurians. Does that make sense to you guys? How many of you understand? Yang Lu Chan took the Chen, which is very like a lot of explosive, fast movements and so on, and he said, no, we'll make it slow, we'll make it smooth, we'll make it gentle. So why not do the same thing with the 𝐻𝐸𝐽, 𝐿𝐻𝐸𝐽? In the 𝐻𝐸𝐽 tradition, thanks Kelly. In the 𝐻𝐸𝐽 tradition, they call that 𝐵𝐼𝐽, which means needling cotton. So 𝐵𝐼𝐽 is when you practice the set with that feeling, with that flow, with that internal connection, paying close attention to the flow of the chi and releasing and opening and closing and so on. So it's not specifically say you can only do it. You know, the Chen style did it with the Northern Shaolin, and it become Taiji. So the Tibetan white crane we'll call 𝐵𝐼𝐽, and in the 𝐻𝐸𝐽 they also have 𝑡𝐶𝐶𝐽, which is called iron wire form, but it also has the idea of hard and soft. You have tension, and then you have relaxation, you have softness. So really, okay, this is the thing. So people say, do you do Tai Chi or Kung Fu? And honestly, at the end, there's no difference. It is a blend of yin and yang, hard and soft, internal, external. They're only different where you start on the circle. You can start here, you can start here, you can start here. Some people try and do 2 things at once, and it doesn't work. But if you properly follow the path, you can get everything. You can go around the circle. So this was the 𝐵𝐼𝐽, but he would teach basically the 𝐻𝐸𝐽 sets. My Sifu's put some new sets together, so he calls it new frame 𝐻𝐸𝐽 𝐵𝐼𝐽, and this is Deng family Taiji. So it is the movements from 𝐻𝐸𝐽, 𝐻𝐸𝐽, Taiji, but put into 3 sets, which have been Tai Fu. Maybe. I'm not sure you can say that, but maybe. Kung Chi is even worse though, so maybe. What is the 𝐻𝐸𝐽 of 𝐵𝐼𝐽? It's needle. 𝐻𝐸𝐽 is a needle. 𝐻𝐸𝐽 is acupuncture. 𝐻𝐸𝐽, needle. Min means cotton. Loi means inside. So 𝐵𝐼𝐽, cotton. Inside it is a needle. So we would say in English, needle in cotton, or needle concealed in cotton. Okay? So that is 𝐵𝐼𝐽. Somebody's messaging me. Okay, so what my Sifu did that's different is he actually choreographed specifically sets for this, rather than simply practicing the other sets in that way. So, any other questions? Because we're gonna wrap it. That's me yakking for 40 minutes. Oh, hang on. Keeping the principle, changing the training to make it more accessible. Exactly. Different training methods. You have to change the training methods depending on what you're trying to get, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And there's also a big difference between training to achieve something and training to preserve something. So sometimes they talk about health preservation, and that's a different mindset to trying to get like a high, master a kung fu technique, for example, that might take 10 years. But to preserve it is like you don't want to lose it. So the training is different for preservation. You're not trying to go up. You're just trying to not go down, right? So health preservation. Any other questions? And then we're going to wrap it. I think what I've covered really is the 3 branches: 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿 Taiji. So any suggestions for other waffles? And next week is are we Christmas week next week? Where are we now? I've been really. Any thoughts on 𝐒𝐻𝐽in? Yeah. No, I don't think it's right. I don't think it's real. Let me just. Yeah, next week is. Gosh darn it! So it's not going to be a waffle for a couple of weeks. I'll be back in the new year, but I will be putting stuff. So I'll be putting stuff up and also explaining about the academy, which is starting in the new year. Which, because of me selling my school and trying to move and everything, I'm a little bit behind schedule. So sorry, but next week's Christmas, so it'll be New Year. But I'll just be putting little videos up, but we won't have any live nuggets. Fujiao, 𝐒𝐻𝐽in means 𝐒𝐻 is empty, 𝐽in is force. The concept of empty force is where you can knock someone over with your chi from a distance without physically touching them. And my opinion is it's a form of hypnosis. It's real in the sense that it works on people that believe in it. I absolutely would not trust it in any way, shape, or form as a self-defense method, because there's not many muggers that are probably going to play along with that one. So whether there's more to it than that, I don't know. So I've seen plenty of masters who demonstrate it. I've never been. No one's ever done it on me, and they have tried. Happy holidays. Take all the time you need. Quality beats quantity. Thanks, Lucas. Appreciate it. Gosh damn it. Made you sound like Steve Rogers. Oh yeah, Avengers. My thoughts as well. Okay, I didn't want to. There it is. I'm a believer in chi, acupuncture, and so on. These practices, I'm not poo-pooing them. Never rely on that in a self-defense situation. Have a good Christmas. Thank you, everybody. Merry Christmas. Seen it in some of the extreme US church services too. Yeah, they call it something else, where they touch them and they fall over, or they knock them back with the power of the Lord or whatever. It's, in my opinion, Joan, it's the same. Again, it's the same. It's dressed up differently, but it's whatever's going on. It's the same thing. Yeah. Thank you, David. Thank you, Sean. Bowl of Kittens, Have a Cool Yule, and Waffle-lots. We got some cool names. Waffle-lots, Wafflings. Okay, everybody. Slain in the spirit. Cool Yule, Merry Christmas, lovely evening. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, John. Suggestion power. Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in this stuff because, you know, Darren Brown did some pretty cool stuff with it. But, you know, if he can make it work in a real fight, it's different. Good rest over Christmas. I will, thank you. I'll send some people who are on the academy some emails about Christmas training. Thanks, Josh and KK. Thanks, Ron. Right, thank you. Thank you all very much, and have a Merry Christmas. And thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to don't forget to join the academy. You can do the free ones, and then you'll be on the mailing list. So if you've done my free courses on the academy, you'll be getting an email about the full thing, which is starting in January. Have a good Christmas, fellow waffles. Great evening. Thank you. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks, all of you, for tuning in. It means a lot. It's keeping me going as well. So thank you. Happy Christmas. Merry Christmas. Peace and blessings. 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿.